Certification training course program installment. Wherever you are, you can please be seated. And if you're tuning in over Facebook, please feel welcome to click on at the top of the Facebook page there should be a drop-down menu for the books. And we are in the third book, the Self-Control book, Self-Control Teacher's Manual. Just go ahead and click on that button and it'll have a drop-down menu for the different books. And as Chris said in the last class, if you're interested in obtaining these books and needing a way to obtain them, please feel free to message us on the Peaceful Solution page there, and we'll get your questions answered as soon as possible. All right, how are you enjoying the nice, hot Texas weather? All right, great, awesome. That's the Peaceful Solution way of thinking, yes. I should have asked you, are you enjoying the cool weather? Okay, so we're going to be, we're picking up tonight in Chapter 5, Maintaining Your Self-Control. Chris already got us started on it in the last class, and actually he even hit on some of it in the previous class before that. Let's turn over to page 117. Page 117. That will give us the title, Chapter 5, Maintaining Your Self-Control. Okay, and we're going to be picking up tonight on page, actually on step 2 here. Let's turn back to LP 5C. In the last class, we learned that the purpose and objective, I want to go over this again with you because we really need to get into our mind, what is it that we're trying to instill into our students? What's the purpose and objective of this lesson of maintaining our self-control? And the goal here is that students will learn how influences can affect their ability to maintain their self-control. And you remember in previous classes, I believe back in probably in the character unit, we learned about maintenance, character maintenance. You know, your character is like a car. If you fail to maintain it, what's going to take place? You're going to end up on the side of the road or in the middle of the road, you know, with cars going by you 70 miles an hour. I remember one time I saw an old lady stuck in, I think it was I-10 going into Houston. There's like 16 lanes of traffic. And she's like right out in the middle. And cars are going by 70, 75, 80 miles an hour, and she's just sitting there, and no one's stopping. You know, I'm not saying that she failed to maintain her vehicle in some way. She might have had a legitimate breakdown, but that's what can occur. You know, you might not just end up on the side of the road. You might end up in the middle of the road. So we have to maintain our self-control as well. That means we need to take care of it, to keep it in the best working condition. That means to practice, first of all, learning what self-control is, and then applying it in our daily life. We're also going to learn how to apply self-control to distinguish between positive and negative influences. And well, you know, how do you do that? Well, you gotta be able to stop and think, is what I'm seeing or what I'm hearing or what I'm doing something I should be doing, seeing, or hearing? You have to learn how to differentiate what's positive and what's negative through the Peaceful Solution. And we're going to learn, it also will help us to distinguish between positive and negative influences and to not let others bring them down to their level. Not let others bring us down to their level, basically is what it's saying. What does that mean? I think Chris said in the last class, you know, we're all at different levels of learning. So if someone hasn't learned the Peaceful Solution yet, or they haven't really, or if they're taking the Peaceful Solution and they're new at it, they're not going to know all the information. So they may react certain ways, they may act a certain way, but we need to, as pioneers in the Peaceful Solution, or people that have been taking the Peaceful Solution longer, we can't let them bring us down to their level of understanding by arguing, bickering, retaliating, etc. We got to show the example to others in maintaining our self-control in our everyday interactions. Okay, so Chris covered procedure 1 about communication, self-control to interaction and communication from chapter 3 or 4. I'm going to pick up on number 2, where it says, tell students that in this lesson they will learn about the various influences that can affect their ability to maintain their self-control. They will also learn how to apply self-control to distinguish between positive and negative influences. And it says, instruct students to turn their handbooks to page 117 and 118 and read the sections entitled Introduction and the Question of the Day. So let's go ahead and let's turn over to page 117. And at the top, there's a little box, a gray box, that says, I want to be different. I guess I'll just have to stand out. And that's something written by Tasha, age 14, a Peaceful Solutions student. And, you know, if you do practice a peaceful solution, you will stand out. You should stand out, you know, amongst other people. You shouldn't be like everyone else when it comes to different behavioral styles, okay? Now, it would be okay to conform to certain dress styles if they were appropriate, certain haircut if it was appropriate, certain speech if it's appropriate. It's okay to conform. Remember, we learned about conformity in the character unit, also in the I believe in the acceptance unit. We talked about it. You know, to conform means to fit in, and there's nothing wrong with fitting in as long as it's positive conformity. We're fitting into something that's positive, that's beneficial, that's gonna be valuable in our life. It's gonna add to our character development, something positive, etc. So maintaining your self-control, introduction. It says, what is your most valuable possession? Is it a piece of jewelry that's been in your family for years, your new CD player, or the 10-speed bike you saved all summer to buy? How do you care for what you value? Do you neglect it and leave it unattended, or do you protect it and guard it? If you neglect to care for and guard your possessions, they will eventually be ruined, lost, or stolen. Needless to say, when you value something, you should take care of it and maintain it. And I think I told you, I asked parents that question, you know. Usually when you ask a parent, you know, what's your most valuable possession? You know, they'll say, oh, my children, you know, my family, or, you know, etc. It's usually their children. And, you know, we have a lot of parents that accompany their children to the Peaceful Solution. So what I try to do is I try to get them to think a little bit. And I don't do it to put them down. I get them to think because I want them I want them to understand if their actions actually match the words that they're speaking. Because they say they value their children. So I'll throw this question at them. Do you value your purse? Oh, yeah, I value my purse, the mom usually says. Okay. Would you leave it outside on that sidewalk out there, unattended? Just leave it laying there? Oh, no, you know, I wouldn't do something like that. Well, why not? Somebody could take it. You know, it's got all my credit cards and my money and my, you know, my ID and, you know, all my makeup and things that are important to me, right? I say, okay. So your purse is valuable to you? Yes. So you wouldn't leave it out on the sidewalk? Oh, no, not at all. So where are your children right now? Well, I think my daughter said she was going to the shopping mall with her friend, right? Do we really know that's where they went? I used to tell my parents would drop me off for different. I remember, I think it was on a Tuesday night, my parents used to drop me off for a catechism class, you know, and around 7 o'clock at the Catholic rectory there in Anchorage, Alaska. And they'd say, we'll be back in 1 hour to get you. An hour later, after we went out and played around town, We didn't go to class. We skipped out on the class. We weren't interested in going in there and learning anything. We wanted to go play with our friends, and we would go out and play for about an hour, and we knew when our parents were going to come to pick us up. And 8 o'clock, we'd be standing there waiting for mom and dad. Hey, what'd you learn tonight? And we'd tell them what we learned, right? And our parents would think nothing of it. So how do you really know where your children are at? Should you leave them unattended in this age that we're living in right here? It's a very dangerous world. Chris hit on it. Catan hit on it. David hit on it. All the recent shootings, the recent events that have taken place, that are taking place at this time. And I believe there was a warning from Homeland Security just put out in the last couple days. Said it's going to be a raging summer of shootings, probably more mass shootings, etc. It's going to be very hot politically and otherwise. So they're expecting a whole lot of events to take place. So is it safe to allow your children just to go unattended anywhere right now? Or at any time? You should know where your children are at all times, and you should have a way of knowing whether they're actually where they say they're at all times. So, because remember, if you neglect them and you leave them unattended, they can be ruined, lost, or stolen. They can be ruined. Their moral character can be ruined. Their lives can be ruined, by various traps that are out there, okay? Because they're not being taught the peaceful solution. So it says in the second paragraph, to maintain anything is to preserve its worth and keep it in the best working condition. A positive character is one of the most important possessions you can own and value, and just like any other valuable possession, you must guard your character and take precautions to protect it. I want you to highlight or underline with a pen, pencil, a highlighter. A positive character is one of the most important possessions you can own and value. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Because let's say a parent thinks their children, their family, their health, their and things are important, okay? And those things are important. But what if you value health, but you don't have a positive character? Because I know a lot of people that say they value their health. They go to the gym, lift weights, they go running, they run every day, but they also use drugs and they drink and they overdrink with alcohol. And they think nothing of that. They just think, well, that's recreation. I'm just having a great time. There's nothing wrong with that, Or they'll drink bottled water, thinking they're being healthy, Of course, they didn't read the back of it that says from the Dallas, Texas water supply. Can't be that healthy, That bottled water, it always has a picture of a spring, a well, or, some kind of, nature picture on it. But really, it's just from the city water, which we should know by now is not very healthy to drink when it's not gone through some filtering processes. So anyway, your character is the most important thing, because without a positive character, you could lose your children, you could lose your family, you could ruin your health. The positive character you got to know how to make the right decisions, how to think things through, and use self-control to make the best choices in your life. Because if you don't, you can make the wrong choice, and one wrong choice. It only takes one wrong choice to lose your family, to lose your children, to lose your health, to lose your house, your car, or whatever else you value. A positive character, and guess what? When all's said and done, heaven forbid any of us, pass away, what's anybody going to remember about you? What are they going to think about the most? I'm not going to be thinking about what kind of car you drove, or what kind of house you lived in. For the most part, they're going to think of what kind of person were you? What kind of character did you have? Were you polite? Were you respectful? Did you practice self-control? Were you forgiving when somebody stepped on your toes, etc.? That's what they're going to remember. So your character is the most important thing, because that's really the only thing you have left in the end. Okay, so It says, you must guard your character and take precautions to protect it. In this way, you can continue to make positive decisions that will benefit you and others. See, it's not just about us. It's going to benefit all of us when we make right decisions, you know. Did you know that you're actually, as a Peaceful Solution student, you're a benefit to everyone around you, okay? They don't know it. They don't realize it. They might see it in different ways, and they might see the effects of positive character in their environment because you're there and you're making the decisions you're making. But they don't really know how valuable a Peaceful Solution student is until certain situations come up and they see your behavior and how you de-escalate situations. Now it says, you now know self-control is an important part of developing a positive character. Whether you're able to successfully handle emotions such as anger, resolve conflicts, and communicate in a peaceful manner depend on your willingness to practice self-control. See, it takes willingness. It's something that we have to choose to do. It's a choice we make to practice self-control. You know, I had a lot of students in the past that used to tell me, you know, when they would come for a drug, what do they call it, substance abuse, and we still have a lot that are sent for substance abuse. And some of them will say, you know, Mr. Krause, I relapsed. I had a relapse, and, you know, I went and did some heroin or, you know, whatever drug of their choice. You know, I relapsed and I did meth or cocaine or whatever it was. And I tell them, you know what? Don't use that word. Don't use that word. That word relapse, you know, it's an excuse. Relapse is an ICD-9 or an International Classification of Diseases code they use so they can bill Medicare or Medicaid and make money off of your choices. But it's not a relapse. What it is, it's a lack of self-control or a lack of a willingness to practice self-control. In that situation, you decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to the meth to get some meth, or I'm going to go back to the crack house and get some crack. Or I'm making a choice to go over to a place I know I shouldn't go because if I go there, it's going to trigger things. There's going to be people there that I shouldn't be around. You already know before you go there what's going to take place. So we should avoid those places, you know, and we shouldn't call it relapse. What we should call it is lack of self-control or unwillingness to practice self-control in that situation. It says, you now know self-control is an important part. Okay, willingness to practice self-control. Last paragraph. In this chapter, you will learn about various influences that can affect your ability to maintain your self-control. You will also learn how to apply self-control to distinguish between positive and negative influences. When you are able to consistently apply self-control to withstand negative influences in all their various forms, you will be protecting your most precious possession, your character. You know, because you're going to be bombarded, literally bombarded with negative influences coming at you all day long from every angle. You know, I know David likes to use that picture of the boy, you know, behind the brick wall, and there's these missiles coming at him. You know, these negative influences are coming at him, and you know the wall's there to protect them. Well, what is that wall? What is your wall of protection? That wall of protection is called the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, and the choices that you're shown to make, the decisions that are in here that show you how to avoid, you know, the pitfalls and the curveballs, and etc. These decisions, these things that are written in this book is what we should be applying in those situations. That's our wall of protection if we'll use it. Our character, our positive character, we need to put it on like a suit of armor, because that's what it is. It's a suit of armor. It's our protection. You know, when you put on humility in a situation where someone wants to argue with you, when you arm yourself with humility and you say, you know what, you know, you're right. It's not worth, you know, you're right. Let's just let it go. You know, that's your armor of protection. That's your wall of protection, because you know what? You just de-escalated the situation and no one's going to get hurt, verbally or physically. When your parents ask you to do something and you obey them, that's your wall of protection, because you know what? Your parents are going to appreciate the fact that you did what you were asked to do willingly, without complaining, arguing, or fighting. And guess what? They're going to trust you. They're going to trust you, and they're probably going to give you more privileges. Okay? So remember that. These are things that protect us when we do them. So look on page 118, and let's look at the question of the day. What are influences? And I know we covered this back in the character unit, but as we progress in the peaceful solution into this self-control unit here, we got to get deeper into this, because, the character unit's kind of giving you a basic rundown of what character is, but here you're getting a little more information that you can add to your storehouse of knowledge that you have on influences and applying self-control to those influences. Now it says, an influence is something or someone who can affect the way you think, feel, and act. Notice, you should underline that. It's something or someone who can affect the way you think, feel, and act. Now, can they make you think, feel, and act a certain way? Can they make you do it? No, they can affect the way you do, but they can't make you do things. They can only try to persuade you or, try to encourage you to do something that you know you shouldn't do or that you should do. Remember, negative influences aren't always negative. Sometimes they're positive. It says influences can also affect what you value, or they can motivate you to adopt new values. You remember on page 6 and page 8 of the character unit, we learned about values. Values are something that is important to you, okay? But then there's also moral values. You remember moral values on page 8. I'm going to read something to you real quick from the character unit. I'm turning to page 8 if anybody does have it. It says, regardless of culture, religion, or environment, there are some values that all people share. They are called moral values. A moral value is like a line that divides right behavior or wrong behavior from right behavior. And I believe Chris showed this even in the last class. It says people from all walks of life, young or old, big or small, rich or poor, share some of the same basic concepts of moral values. For instance, not stealing. That's a moral value. Moral means a rule. It's a rule. Morals are rules. Morals are rules that don't bring harm to yourself or anybody else, like do not steal, not trespassing, not name calling, not disrespecting somebody, not taking advantage of others. These are all moral values. Moral values. Remember that. So, back to the thought about values here on page 118 in the self-control, it says that influences can affect those values. The influences, the people or things that you see, that you come across in your life, people that you see, books that you read, movies you see, documentaries, etc., these can all motivate you to adopt new values. Or a friend can motivate you to adopt some immoral values, that are not something that you should be doing if you follow along with their immoral conduct, such as stealing, name calling, teasing, bullying, etc. Because remember, we're talking about junior high grade level here. Anything that has the potential to affect what you value also has the potential to affect your character and hence your self-control. Did you know that your parents or guardians are the most influential people in your life? It is from them that you learned what to value. Your personality and character are developed through the environment that your parents provide for you. And if you could put up that first slide, this reminded me of back in the last unit, the acceptance unit, chapter 2. The character unit, chapter 2 on page 44, about the effects of character within the family. Because, this is where we learn, by the examples of our parents, our siblings, those that they allow in the house, etc. They affect our character, their actions. And on page 44, it says there are many dysfunctional families where there is child abuse, alcoholism, and substance abuse. But there are equally as many families that are loving and all members are respectful to each other. However, in most families today, there are many conflicts. Okay, there's a lot of conflicts in families today. Okay, and guess what? They don't really know how to resolve them in a peaceful manner for the most part. Now, sometimes they do. Sometimes, they apply certain principles found in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, but they don't have a working knowledge. And remember, knowledge is power, right? They don't have a working knowledge of the Peaceful Solution. They don't have a full scope of actually how to play. Because they might say, yes, I forgive you. If you go into your little brother's room and take something that don't belong to you and you use it without permission, your brother might say, I forgive you. And then 10 minutes later, he's back in your face accusing you for taking that item out of his room when he just said he forgave you, because he doesn't understand forgiveness isn't just a word. True forgiveness is, not holding any kind of grudge against that person, or any kind of ill will against the person for what they did. You let it go. You don't keep bringing it up. Okay, so they don't have that knowledge. They don't have that full knowledge of these character traits. There's no way they can truly forgive from the heart. Now, I was thinking of my parents, my dad. And I'm going to talk about my dad because my dad, he influenced me in a lot of ways. And I was thinking of the ways that he influenced. Just give a couple of examples of how he influenced me. Man, this same fly that was bugging Chris last class, he's all up in me too. I think it's the same fly. So anyway, let's look at the next slide because I told you my dad was a firefighter. And he was a fire inspector. His father was the first Alaska State Fire Marshal. So, the fire business ran in my family, okay? And I remember the things my dad would teach me about. Since he was all off into fire, that was like the most important thing he talked about. So he would always bring me home one of those little junior fire hats, and I remember wearing those little fire hats, and having fun with those and thinking I was really important, and he'd always go over fire safety rules with us, and we would do fire drills. We would jump out our window. That was always fun, jumping out the windows and learning where we're going to meet if we ever have a fire. And these things were constantly done in our home, and I'm glad they were because it instilled within us the importance of having a plan. If something ever went wrong like that, if we ever had a fire. And I'm sure we're probably only one of the few families in our neighborhood that would ever do anything like that. But sometimes they'd see us hanging sheets out the window and climbing down, and they're probably thinking, "What are they doing over at that house, man?" But my dad would always put us through these drills, and he would show pictures of, charred bodies and things to me, because I had a bad habit. My dad was in the fire business, but I loved playing with matches, and I loved burning stuff. And I'm sure I've told you a few times, I'm on record in Anchorage, Alaska. I burnt down a historical home that was like the oldest home in Anchorage, Alaska. I started a fire in the closet. I was hiding in the closet with my friend, and we lit a match, and the clothes went on fire, and, half the house burnt down. And, of course, my dad was probably involved in the inspection of the fire, and, here I was involved in the fire. Here's my dad, involved in fire, and I'm starting fires, right? And I was thinking about this today because, just because our parents might have a certain job or a certain skill, that doesn't mean we're necessarily going to do what they do. We might go the other direction. We might give our parents, in this case, my dad was a fireman, and I gave him fires to put out, and I gave him fires to what do you call it, investigate. He was a fire investigator as well. So, but I consider the things that he did, that he taught us, very positive, because it taught me how to have a plan when there was trouble. Okay, now let's put up the next slide. Next slide. One after that. Okay. Now here's a picture of my dad, an actual picture of my dad. He's the one in the middle. He's you're talking to some fire guys there at the firehouse. You know, this is probably back in the late 60s. And, of course, he's got a cigarette in his hand, you know. That's the one thing about my dad that I really remember around that time. When this picture was taken, I was probably about 6, 7 years old. He was probably about 69 there. I was born in 62. And I really admired my dad. You know, he was a smoker. And back then, we could go to the store and we could buy candy cigarettes, just like our parents had. As you can see here, I put some candy cigarettes there. My dad smoked Lucky Strikes. And the candy cigarettes that they would sell in the store for about 10 cents, you had a little box of them, just like a pack of cigarettes. And I remember my dad smoked Lucky Strikes, so I was going to smoke Lucky Strikes too. And I would go get those candy cigarettes, and I would pull them out. They were like a little long stick with a little red end on them, so it looked like you were smoking a cigarette. And I would sit there and I would act like my dad, you know, because my dad was cool, man. He smoked cigarettes, right? And I remember when I was about 10 years old, you know, they used to have those cigarette machines, you know, where you pulled the handle, put in 50 cents for a pack, pulled the handle, and cigarettes would come out. There wasn't anybody guarding those machines. So, you know, any minor, it just had a little warning on there. Minors are not allowed to buy cigarettes. Well, guess what? Minors aren't going to care what that sign says. If they're not taught the peaceful solution, they're going to go ahead and buy those cigarettes. So I would put that 50 cents in and I would buy those cigarettes. And when I was about 10 or 11 and I came home, you know, smelling like cigarettes, my mom, she was not a smoker. She didn't drink. She didn't smoke. My mom was pretty straight-laced. She would smell that smoke on me and say, "Where's your cigarettes?" And she would find those Lucky Strikes, because that's what I started smoking. I think I started smoking Cools and Lucky Strikes. And my mom would find them, and she would take them and put them in the sink and dunk them in the water and give them back to me and say, "Here's your cigarettes, boy." You know, and they'd be all wet, and I'm like, "Come on, Mom, those were 50 cents." You know? And, but, you know, our parents can have influences, whether they're negative and whether they're positive. So I considered that to be a negative influence. You know what? My dad passed away just about 3 years ago from emphysema. His father died of lung cancer, okay? And they were both very heavy smokers, okay? And I used to smoke. I smoked cigarettes till about 1998, when I learned the peaceful solution, and I finally determined I'm never going to have another cigarette. And I learned that you only quit once, and I quit, and I haven't had a cigarette since. And I'm thankful for that. But you know what? The only way I learned how to do it is through the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And I learned to drop a lot of other things I was doing too through the same program. So we do know it works. It works if you use it. If you apply it in your life, it will work. Now it says, there are many other influences. They range from subtle and harmless to obviously dangerous. Now that word subtle, we've gone over this before, I think back in the character unit, but subtle just means very, very underhanded, you know, like very sneaky, like a snake in the grass, you know, you don't even know it's there until it starts rattling, you know, or bites you in the leg or something, right? Or you step on it. And hopefully it's not a poisonous snake like a rattlesnake. Hopefully it's a bull snake or some other snake. But we do have them here in West Texas. We have a lot of snakes. You got to watch out. But they're very subtle. They're sneaky. They're quiet. You don't even know they're there. And that's how influences can be. And then there's the obviously dangerous influences, like somebody asking you to ride your bike off your roof to see if you can do one of those Evel Knievel jumps. You know, I don't know if you know who he was, but, you know, he was one of those daredevils, they called, that would do all these stunts, you know, he would risk his life doing stunts. Like I think one of his stunts he did was, and this is how old I am, okay, I'm sorry, but Evel Knievel was, you know, jumping, you know, 20 buses, or, you know, he was trying to jump the Snake River Canyon, or, you know, he had rocket boosters on the back of his motorcycle, and he had a parachute on, and, you know, he was going to jump that Grand Canyon, and, you know, it was on at 7 o'clock prime time, and the whole world was watching whether he could do it or not. And they were telling you the whole time, well, don't try this at home, children. You know, don't try this at home. Well, guess what? I tried it at home. I didn't try to jump the Snake River Canyon, but I jumped 10 trash cans on my bicycle. With a motorcycle, my friend pulled me on his motorcycle. On the back of the motorcycle, I hit the ramp on my bike, and I made it over 10 trash cans. But when I landed, the front tire landed first. My mom was watching out the front window with a look of shock and horror because she didn't know what I was doing. She only saw the little ramp there and the trash cans I'd lined up, but she didn't know what I was getting ready to do. And she saw me land on that end ramp with my front tire first. I almost went head over with that thing. If I had, I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now. Something occurred and that bike corrected and I was able to land, and boy, I was so pleased with myself. Scared to death, but so pleased with myself. Man, I thought I was Fonzie, like on that show, he jumps in trash cans too, I think, on his motorcycle. But these are the kind of influences I grew up with, and I tried these things because I saw them and I thought, well, my parents let me watch it. It can't be something I shouldn't try if this guy's doing it. If I can do it and I can live, obviously it's okay. But it's not okay. Okay, I learned it's not okay in the Peaceful Solution because it's risk-taking behavior. You can bring harm to yourself, so it can't be moral. It's not moral behavior to bring harm to yourself or anyone else. So it says, in fact, some influences can be so subtle you might not realize you're being influenced to think or behave in a particular way. And it says, consider the following case study. Many years ago, a popular soft drink boosted its sales by flashing a bottle of its product on screen for less than a second while people watched a movie. Within a few minutes, more than half the people in the theater suddenly felt thirsty and were compelled to buy a bottle of that particular soft drink. None of them realized they had seen the bottle flash on the screen prior to becoming thirsty. They all thought their thirst was normal and that they had made their own decision to buy that particular drink. Excuse me. Okay, so the rumor is that was Coca-Cola that did that. I'm not sure, but I want to explain something. If you can put up the next visual so I can explain to the students how this really works. This is film, okay? And film, you have frames, you have pictures. The film is just a bunch of pictures, continuous pictures with a soundtrack added into it. But it's just pictures. It's pictures that, one picture after another where it makes the person appear like they're actually moving, right? Well, for every second of film on a movie reel, I don't know if you've ever seen a movie reel, a big reel of film that they have at the movie houses. There's used to be, I don't know how many now, they have a lot now, there can be 120 frames per second, but back then it used to be about 33 frames of film for every second of film that you saw. So 1 second is pretty quick, right? So they can put 33 pictures in 1 second of film, and they can add in just one of those frames, drink Coca-Cola or drink Pepsi or drink this right here, drink this drink right here, drink this. And it's a flash. Your conscious mind doesn't pick it up. Okay? It doesn't see it. Now, but your subconscious mind, it does go into your eyes because everything goes in through your eyes or your mouth or et cetera, right? It goes into your eyes, but your subconscious mind don't pick it up or your conscious mind doesn't pick it up because it's too quick. But your subconscious mind does record it because it's recording everything. Remember, there's two parts to your mind, the conscious and the subconscious. Okay, now, so do you understand the concept? They can put something in, they could even put something in 3 or 4 of those frames because there's 33 frames. And you might see a little blip if they do that because, you might notice something if they put it in more than 1 frame, but they can just put it in 1 frame where it's just a, quick, less than a fraction of a second. But your mind records it, whether you saw it or not, your mind does record it. Let me give you an example. Let's go to the next slide here. The Food Network. I don't know how many of y'all have ever seen the Food Network. They got caught one time in 2007 inserting a flash of the McDonald's logo during the popular show Iron Chef. Okay, and you can see this for yourself. You can go on YouTube and see it. But it's less than a second. Okay, they're doing their program. These guys are cooking some food. And all of a sudden, there's this like one frame, just one. This guy had to slow it down, like so slow. You have to slow it down way, way, way down to catch it. But in just one frame of this film, of this show, in just less than a second, you see this I'm Loving It McDonald's logo. Okay? Now, the Food Channel and McDonald's, you know, of course, they both said, oh, we don't know how that got in there. But I think there was probably some collaboration, you know, more than likely, okay? But sometimes they get caught doing it, okay? That's the point I'm trying to make. Sometimes the subliminal messaging, they're caught doing it. But you know what? A lot of times they're not. And a lot of times, that's not the only subliminal messaging that's taking place. Okay? There's things being done right out in the open. There's things being done right out in front of your children, and they don't realize what's being done. I'll give you a case in point. I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to tell you a basic, I'll give you a basic understanding. MTV Music Awards are a great example, or even the Grammy Awards. Do you realize when they're doing their production, it's a production, of course. It's usually staged because they have cues. Everybody knows what to say, you know. Like when they get up there and the hosts are hosting the show, they're reading from a script that's pre-written. So most everything that's taking place, it's already pre-planned, okay? It's already pre-planned, the script is written, and even the people, you know, have you ever noticed when they mention a certain actor, like they're sitting at, or not an actor, but a singer at the MTV Awards, there's a big audience of people, and they mention a certain singer, and all of a sudden, the camera's already focused on that person. Well, how did they know to focus on that person so quickly? Because there's so many people. How did they know to focus on that singer and not all the other singers sitting out there? You know why? Because they already have it planned. It's already planned. It's already pre-scripted. So they already know, okay, when this guy says this, make sure that camera's ready over here to be on that singer right there so we can get her reaction, so she can pretend she's reacting a certain way. Because they're all a bunch of acting going on. It's a bunch of acting taking place. You understand that, right? So in these MTV Music Award ceremonies, the 2009 one is a great case in point, but they do it every year. But this is the one where I started learning what they were doing. They were actually doing occult rituals in their programming. And I'm talking about these people are all into different, they have different religious beliefs, you know, and there's certain rituals that they perform in their ceremonies. Probably why they call it a ceremony, right? That if you don't know what their religion teaches, you won't know what they're doing right in front of you. You won't perceive it because you don't know it. But because you're not initiated into that particular belief system. But the ones that are initiated into that belief system, they know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it right in front of you, and you don't even know they're doing it. You just think that, you know, you're just thinking that Kanye West came up to the singer there. What was that girl's name? Blonde-haired singer, country singer. Who? Taylor Swift. Yeah, Taylor Swift. 2009 MTV Awards. He came up to Taylor Swift and he grabbed her trophy from her and he says, Beyonce is the greatest singer of all time. And you know, of course, she had to act like she was shocked, you know. But she already knew what was going to take place. Scripted. And of course, the next day, everybody was talking about what a jerk that guy is for taking. Did you see what he did? He went right up there on the stage and he took that trophy from that girl and he said, Beyonce is the best singer of all time. And he belittled that girl. He made her feel so horrible in front of the whole world. You know, this is what they're thinking. Even President Obama was getting involved in it. He was saying something about it. Well, guess what? At the end of the show, she comes out with Beyonce. They're both dressed in the exact same dresses. And she gets her moment in the sun again, you know, because what she went through was an initiation process. You know, usually when you're initiated into a gang, which Taylor Swift was joining the gang back in 2009, she became famous. So they were initiating her into the order, so to speak. That was her initiation. And usually in your initiation, you have to do something like, you know, hurt somebody or do something crazy to join the gang. Well, in this case, she had to go through like a hazing process of having her trophy taken from her in front of the whole world and made to look, you know, they call it to shame her. That was part of her initiation. I'm not going to get into all the details. I'm just telling you, this is what they do. Am I telling you to watch it so you can see what they do? No. I'm encouraging you not to watch to see what they do. I'm telling you they're doing things and they're having an effect on your character, whether you know it or not, doesn't matter. It's having some kind of an effect on you. It's affecting the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you behave. Whether you realize it or not, does not matter. It still has an effect. But now if you know the peaceful solution and you know what they're doing, you're probably going to want to avoid those kind of things, right? All right, let's go to the next slide. This is from the Houston Chronicle. This is about subliminal marketing. It says the laws on subliminal marketing. This is from 2019. It says the United States doesn't have a specific federal or state law addressing the use of subliminal messages. Instead, it's the country's advertising and broadcasting regulatory agencies that deal with the topic and its impact on the public. In other countries, it says, like Britain and Australia, they ban subliminal advertising for any reason. They don't allow it, okay? Now, the FCC says that they will revoke the broadcast license of any company that uses subliminal marketing in its broadcast. Of course, I mean, what do they have? Subliminal marketing police going around checking all the advertising? No. You know, so it's not something that's really enforced, you know, unless somebody catches it and somebody goes to them about it. Let's go to the next slide. Continuing in the same article, there's court rulings about subliminal advertising. It says, subliminal advertising, because it's intended to produce information that the viewer is not aware he is receiving, has been ruled as not protected by the First Amendment. So subliminal messaging, according to a court in New York, is not protected by the First Amendment because the person doesn't even know that you're trying to affect the way he's thinking, feeling. He doesn't even know that he's receiving this information because it's hidden. Okay, now it says in the 1989 case, Vance versus Judas Priest, that's a rock group, a Nevada judge ruled that subliminal messages aren't protected by the First Amendment and do constitute an invasion of privacy. In other words, you're invading someone's privacy by using subliminal messaging or backmasking. They called it in the music industry, where they would say things backwards or sing things backwards, and insert them into the track. Okay, and your conscious mind didn't pick it up. You know, I think the great example they used to use of the Beatles used "Paul is Dead" or something in 1966. Paul is dead. But, you know, when they sang it, you couldn't really hear it unless you played the song backwards, and it would say, Paul is dead, talking about Paul McCartney, one of the singers for the Beatles. Because the big rumor was Paul McCartney died and some lookalike came and took his place. You know, that's not the real Paul McCartney today that it was originally, I guess, is what they were saying. Now, they also ruled that subliminal messaging was not used in that particular case, in the Judas Priest case, because to date, no one had proven that subliminal messages could actually move someone to act against their will. And, we use this example of Judas Priest. I think it was a song they wrote called Beyond the Realms of Death. It's in one of the later versions of the Peaceful Solution, I believe in the BME, so I won't go to that one. But I'll give you an example. I don't know why you would have to go and look at and do the backward masking and play songs backwards to hear what they call satanic messages or evil messages or hidden messages. Why don't you just play it forward and listen to the lyrics? No, not you. Go ahead and put up the next slide. I'll give you an example of some Judas Priest lyrics. This is from Killing Machine. It says, "What manner of man am I? A gun, a lump sum, and then I move on. I do what I do because I can't do nothing better. You do what you do, just defending yourself because you got nothing better to do. I got no face, no name, I'm just a killing machine. I cut the population down, if you know what I mean. They pay me the money and I do the job. I got a contract on you." Now, what do you have to play that backwards to hear something that's really, really hideous and an evil crime? No, all you got to do is just look at it. Just listen to it, right? I think that's a form of deception where they make you think that, man, if you play that record backwards, they got some really evil stuff. But when you play it forwards, look what it's singing about. Now, I'm going to give you another example. Just go to the next slide. This is an actual do you remember, any of you guys are as old as I am. I'm 60 years old this year. You remember that when the TV signed off the air, back in the old days. I can only attest to when I was alive. When we were watching TV, the TV would go off about midnight, 1 o'clock, and they would do a sign-off, and they would play the national anthem as the sign-off every night when TV shut down. Whatever channel you were watching, ABC, NBC, CBS, they always signed off playing the national anthem. And here's one of the original TV sign-offs from the 1960s. Now, I gotta tell you what to watch for, or you're going to get confused. Do you see the subtitle down there on this slide where it says, obey, consume, obey, consume? The person that made this video wrote that in there for you so you can see what's flashing in front of you in the letters in the actual commercial as they're transitioning. Do you follow? So when you see the actual letters, when they're transitioning, what they're doing is they put up the lyrics to the national anthem. And as each lyric is transitioning, there's a hidden message that you see just for a split second. But your mind, remember, it's subliminal. Your mind doesn't pick it up because it's too quick. What we did is slow it down so you can see it. Okay? So when you see obey, consume written on the bottom in different font, that's because the person that made the video put it there for you to see what's actually being shown in the video. So why don't you go ahead and play that video for everyone, and we can see an example. Watch the font of the actual video as it transitions each time. Remember, this is slowed way down for you.
So they've never disproven that. That's an actual subliminal message. They've tried. They said that it's not, it's that as far as they know, that is real. Okay? Now, but that's how you would do it. Just like you saw right there. That's how you would do it. Notice how the letters, as they're transitioning to the next verse of the song, other text is written in there, but it's just flashing in there for a split second. You don't even notice it. Remember, your conscious mind doesn't pick it up, but your subconscious mind picks it up. And in this case, you know, they're probably just thinking, well, we want people to obey the government. We don't want rebellion. We want people to, you know, to them, it's like there's no wrong intent there as far as they're concerned, right? So, and I remember the author of The Peaceful Solution telling us one time, you know, there's another way they do these, you know, through, in the stores, they were playing these subliminal messages where, you know, it said, do not steal. You know, stealing is wrong. You know, you don't steal because you know stealing is wrong. You know, they'd play these little messages over the radio. You couldn't hear them. You know, it wasn't something you could hear consciously, but the messages were hidden where your subconscious would pick it up. And they said it actually helped cut down on the theft, according to the author of The Peaceful Solution. He said it actually did work. Remember, it won't work for every single person, but it does affect all of us in a certain way. Remember, influences can be subtle, very sneaky, and not even know they're there. It says, this, back on page 118, it says, this form of advertising uses subliminal message to influence behavior and is so powerful that it was outlawed. Not only are influences powerful, they are all around us. Everything we experience through our senses, you know, our seeing, our hearing, our smelling, our touching, our tasting, has the potential to affect our choices. It's up to you to be aware of the influences around you and be prepared to practice self-control in what you allow yourself to be influenced by. Notice there's a willfulness there. You have to allow yourself to be influenced by these things. If you know the music is negative and you listen to it, you are willfully doing it. You're allowing yourself to be influenced by it. Okay? If you don't know it's there, well, that's why education comes in. It's very important to get educated and get all the facts about these things so you can know how they're using these manipulations. And, you know, there's this kind of influence going on everywhere, okay? It's very subtle, okay? It's going on everywhere. You might not see it, and some of it is very dangerous. In fact, very dangerous. And it says at the bottom, influences can generally be placed into two categories, positive and negative. And that's what we're going to learn about next class. What are positive influences? What are negative influences? And we'll learn about the STOP acronym, using the STOP acronym, using self-control and applying it and using self-control and applying it in this manner here. So what's the next class date? The next class date will be on Sunday,
Sunday at 5:30, 6:12 at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. We hope you'll join us. You've been a great class. We'll see you next time.